So let's talk about PTS and let's talk about today's agenda. What we're going to talk about is what is PTS, the human endocannabinoid system, the research on cannabis is used for PTS, some of the basics for medical marijuana. We're going to talk about terpenes, routes of administration and dosing for you, and product recommendations. And then we're going to have Q&As with the presenters after this particular presentation. Let's jump into what is PTS. And Manny, this is very important because there's the term PTS and PTSD. Why don't you help me distinguish between the two?
So most personnel are familiar with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm going to lean more into the post-traumatic stress side of it and explain what that is, as it's more unknown to the regular person. And basically, what it is when you have that direct, immediate response following a traumatic event, as it states. And a good example of that I like to use is, let's say you were in a car and you had to hard brake, almost rear-ended somebody, or almost got in an accident but didn't. And for a little while, you're shook, maybe even a couple of days to a couple of weeks, but it then fades away. You're able to drive again, and that fear is no longer there. That's a post-traumatic stress response that you're dealing with because of that significant event that happened in that moment. And then what happens is, if you're not able to drive, or if you're not able to continue those activities because of that specific event, then I believe it becomes more of a disorder. And I'll let Jeff jump on that one a little bit.
I think it's more prevalent when you're first getting out of service, or even if you're a first responder, those first few years that you're decompressing and becoming a normal person again. I think it might be more difficult to drop those memories or not have nightmares or whatever. And so you're more in a post-traumatic stress disorder phase, and not so much as what Manny was talking about before, because your life is disrupted and you are trying to cope with these situations on a daily basis. It just makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and also brings in, when you get into the PTSD area, you get into like nightmares, for example, and you get into feelings of anxiety and guilt and things like that. And that's really, really important, because when you have PTS, it's something that can actually potentially even calm down and maybe even be able to be treated much easier than PTSD.
To that point, Mark, one thing that I did leave out is that PTS is typically undiagnosed, or is not diagnosed clinically, because I believe that most don't actually go to the clinic for it. They get over that situation within a few days to a couple of weeks. It doesn't become that disorder where they need treatment.
Sure,
Yeah,
it's there.
100%.
Now, one of the things that's interesting is, PTSD has been associated with veterans, but really that's not necessarily limited to veterans. A lot of folks who are normal or celebrities, for example, do have PTS. You take it, like, for example, Mick Jagger, you take it Whoopi Goldberg, Jackie Kennedy, Barbra Streisand as an example. These are folks that are not necessarily in the military, but have experienced PTS and PTSD. Your thoughts on that, Manny?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. From my experience, the clients that I work with, majority of the time is due to neglect and or abuse, and unfortunately and ironically enough, that they don't recognize it until they start getting around people or persons or situations where they're no longer being neglected or abused, and that's when it kind of hits them like a train wreck, if you will. So it could be anybody. You don't have to be at war. You don't have to be a police officer under dire situations. You don't necessarily have to have a significant emotional event that triggers it. It could be anything as simple as, a loss of a loved one. They'll hold that over your head. Somebody that really meant something to you, and you got to deal with that because they're no longer in your life. It's significantly different for each individual. It'd be unfair to put it under one blanket and categorize it as such. So if you're feeling that, please reach out for help. You don't have to be under certain protocols to experience PTS or develop PTSD.
And Jeff, you run into this quite a bit when you're trying to work with a number of veterans. You find that there are other family members that have the situation, but not necessarily because of the fact that they were in the service.
Of course, right? Just like Manny said, I mean, just from a car accident, can traumatize you to the point where you don't feel comfortable unless you're in the back seat, whatever it might be. And one thing that I like to say is, I really think we've come a long way in understanding PTSD and and how to treat and the effects of it. And I don't want anybody to get hung up on the fact that, it's part of a mental health awareness or a mental health condition, because, there's a stigma behind it. And, the best thing I could tell you, I feel so much better now. I'm coming up on my 19th anniversary of being out of the service, a 19-year anniversary. But compared to what I felt like when I first got out, and traumas that I was dealing with then, as a young man was very hard for me. And I wish that I would have been able to meet some folks like us in my younger years.
You know, you've experienced it, and Manny, you've experienced PTS and PTSD. You both have experience at this. This is coming from real life experience, not necessarily medical research.
Absolutely. Just like Jeff was saying as well. We did a whole segment about it, but probably 6 months ago. It goes very, very deep. For me, it lasted probably about 13, 14 years, close to you there, Jeff. And it's not fun to live with. And trying to set it up as something that, I'm going to be stigmatized. I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be looked at as not to hang around with that person. He could snap at any
Sure,
time. Your
sure.
symptoms of PTS and PTSD doesn't mean you're going to snap and go crazy. It just means that you're hurting. You don't know how to
Sure.
handle it. You don't know what's going on, and really need to seek out that help from individuals that are professionals or
Right.
subject matter experts or both.
You know, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from someone was half of solving a problem is realizing that you have it. Because until
Yeah.
you really say, look, I've got it, and it's okay for me to have it, let me go treat it. I think that's an important step.
And I'm sure you've heard many veterans go, "Oh, I don't need to be VA evaluated for disability. I'm fine." And somebody else needs it more than me. And that's the kind of mindset I think that comes from being a veteran. You're
Sure.
taught not to display that weakness or show that, or you don't want to be in sick bay or whatever, or admit that something's wrong with you, because frankly, that's kind of what happened to me. Is I got hurt, pretty much ended my career. It was a hard struggle for me to continue doing normal things as a young man, and I felt completely incapable of doing it.
So let's talk about how cannabis can help, because I think that we know that cannabis has done a lot to help people with PTS and PTSD. I do want to point out that when people ask me what's the big deal about cannabis, I always like to talk about the fact that we have a nervous system, and we've known about our nervous system basically since we were young. And this is something where if you hurt your finger, you hurt your stomach, you bang your knee, a signal sent up through your nervous system, electrical signal is sent to your brain. And when it gets to your brain, it says, Houston, we have a problem. And for years, the question has been, what did Houston do about it? And what they found out in the 60s and 70s when they started researching medical cannabis is that our body also has an endocannabinoid system. And that endocannabinoid system is something where your body produces the endocannabinoids and then is actually sends them to that part of your body to help you manage the pain, the anxiety, the memory, the appetite, the inflammation, the effects. It really is something that helps your body heal itself and stay in homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is really important. And this is something where it's a very natural process between your body and cannabis. Manny, tell me about endocannabinoids.
Yes, I'd be very happy to. And basically, the way I like to submit it to all the clients I work with is that your body naturally has what's called like an internal pharmacy. It naturally produces 2-AG, which is very equivalent molecularly to CBD. And it also produces what we call anandamide, and that's very equivalent to THC. Now, THC really reacts with your CB1 receptors through your brain and your mind. We'll go into that a little later, whereas CBD reacts with your peripheral CB2 receptors. However, your body also, or if your body is not producing these endocannabinoids effectively or efficiently, then that's where marijuana or cannabis or medical marijuana, however you want to classify, comes into play with phytocannabinoids.
Phytocannabinoids are produced by the cannabis plant, and they exactly mimic the cannabinoids in your body.
So phytocannabinoids, phyto meaning from the light, are produced in the the cannabis plant. And basically the cannabinoids that we're really discussing here is THC, as previously mentioned, equivalent to anandamide, and 2-AG, CBD, which is equivalent to 2-AG. Again, as it states there, they're very structurally identical, and you're supplementing your body's natural pharmacy for the deficiency of endocannabinoids is producing. And to just give you a little tidbit of that, you probably already know what I'm talking about, even though it sounds very scientific. If you do exercise, or if you go for jogs or anything like that, or if you exert yourself to a certain point right after, typically you get what most people would call a runner's high. It's a great feeling of clarity, stress-free. Your body feels good, your mind feels good, and that's anandamide being released into your brain and your spinal cord, which is equivalent to THC. So if you
Sure.
think you're confused, trust me, a little bit of studies, you'll figure it out pretty easy.
When you start using cannabis, you'll feel the effects. And when you feel better and you reduce the stress and anxiety, it really helps quite a bit. So let's dig a little bit deeper into does it work? And I'm not going to go into these studies. I just want people to know there's a lot of research that's been done on PTS and PTSD dating back to 2010. And there's studies that are going on right now to be able to really have people understand the effects that it has and really how to use it effectively to address these particular situations. This is something that is known, studies. It's not something just on the side where somebody came up with an idea that maybe this would work. This is something that's been proven, not only from a study standpoint, but I think, Jeff, I do want to point out, it also has been proven because there's a lot of veterans that have used it and found out that it works, right?
Absolutely. So part of the problem is those two previous slides that you showed, central nervous system and the endocannabinoid system are separate, but you're so, for me personally, I was so clouded with pharmaceuticals that cannabis was my only way out. So once I started studying and learning a little bit about cannabis, I was able to cut my opioids in half. And from there, my whole body started getting better. And I didn't really know why. I wasn't in a medical state. I was using street cannabis and just trying to not take pharmaceuticals. And when I moved to Florida and started meeting people like you guys, I learned a lot more as to why I was able to chop all that pharmaceutical out of my life. And it was because of this.
So I want to point out, not only is there research from the standpoint of the scientists, but there's also research from the standpoint of scar tissue. People have, like Jeff, you've experienced this and you basically know it works.
So many veterans that the Grateful Veteran has helped have come back to us year after year. Like, it's a true statement what we wear on our shirt, cannabis saves lives. And, there is a stigma behind cannabis, but the stigma should be, oh my God, how much better can I feel?
Hey, Mark, I'd also like to point out real quick before we jump off of this slide that these studies are the most recent studies documented that also remember cannabis was being used as a medicine back in the early 1900s up until about, I believe, 1930, 1931, maybe before the hypodermic syringe came out. So keep in mind that this has been around for quite a while.
That's an excellent point, Jeff. Up until 1937, when they passed the regulations to basically make cannabis illegal, this was part of what they call a pharmacopoeia. The pharmacopoeia of in the United States is what the doctors use to be able to recommend and to treat patients. Over 60% of the recommendations had cannabis or a cannabis mixture in it. And by the way, at that particular time, you can not only buy cannabis over the counter, you could also buy cocaine over the counter as well.
Yeah.
So really, what are the main components of cannabis, Manny? I mean, this is the real key to it. It's really something it's not complex, but it does have some interesting components to it.
It really does. This is just the cream of the crop, so to speak, Mark. And basically, the three main components are going to be your cannabinoids, your CBD and THC, as we've been discussing. THC being the euphoric effect or psychoactive effect. CBD non-euphoric and actually mitigates the effects or euphoric effects of THC. Then you have your terpenes, your organic hydrocarbons, and I like to describe those as what drives the bus. You could have a straight THC component or a straight CBD component, and you're not going to know which way that's going to affect you without the terpenes, most importantly, and as well as the flavonoids. Now, the flavonoids are, I think, overlooked right now because everybody's on the terpene bandwagon, as they should be. It took a little while for everybody to get on that bus, and then the flavonoids will come in. But the flavonoids really give it that aroma, that colorization. They do contribute to the effects. I don't believe right now as much as terpenes do, but you want the whole pot. You want the whole entourage effect of it.
Well, it really helps to be able to support the terpenes work with, for example, as an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. And I should point out, cannabinoids, if you think about a cannabinoid and what it does, think of it like a Lego. Your receptors in your body all have different shapes and different sizes, and the cannabinoids actually bind to those particular receptors. And when they do the binding, they then open up those receptors for the terpenes and the flavonoids to be introduced in and be able to be absorbed by those receptors. That's the process that's going on. And really that leads to something called the entourage effect. Jeff, tell me a little bit about that, because this is really key.
Well, that's all three working together at the same time. And, that's goes back to that finding, what works best for you. When you're trying to medicate yourself, you want to realize what you're doing and how you're doing it to get there. And with the entourage effect, it's not anything that you have to try to do or not anything that you have to, remember how to do. It comes naturally with cannabis because all three things are present in each piece of cannabis that you might use.
Sure. Well, what the interesting thing about cannabis is because it works as with the endocannabinoid system, and your body knows if you have a problem or not. It doesn't need a doctor to tell you have a problem. If you have a hurt knee, you have a hurt your shoulder, your body knows that, and what it does is it tries to then go in and try to put yourself back in homeostasis or heal itself. So the entourage effect, there's people that'll take, for example, cannabis, they'll address PTSD, then they'll find out that the pain in their shoulder goes away or the pain in their knee goes away, or basically they feel a lot better. These work together. Your body knows what's going on. And so really by being able to introduce and have these three work together, they're more powerful than working by themselves, and they become a better type of medicine for you. Now let's take a look at the terpenes, because Manny, this is something that you mentioned earlier. Terpenes are really the key. This particular slide shows the terpene toolbox where we match symptoms to the terpenes. This is something that we use when people come in and say, I have this particular problem. We're able to then match the terpenes to the issue. But let's talk, the ones highlighted in green here are the ones that really are good for PTS. Why don't you take us through a little bit of this?
Absolutely. So looking at the first one, an analgesic, pinene, linalool, myrcene, caryophyllene, my favorite analgesic or pain relieving terpene. You have an antidepressant, anti-inflammatory, caryophyllene, again, number one for me, elevates mood, improves absorption of terpenes, muscle relaxant. Basically what this is a master chef's recipe on what product a client or a consumer or a patient should be using in order to determine the effects they're looking for, whether it be daytime, something to help sleep, something midday, something very euphoric, very not, or excuse me, not as euphoric. You're not going to find just one specific one. It's going to be a couple. And when you're looking for these, you're going to basically find these. Some websites will have them available from dispensaries. Otherwise, you can ask for what we call a certificate of analysis or COA. So that way you can see specifically what ingredients, terpenes, are going to be in the product that you're using, whether it be daytime, nighttime, uplifting, very sedative, and so forth.
Yeah, and it's important to point out towards the bottom over here, you see some things about where they talked about it relieves stress, and more importantly, it's sedative. One of the biggest problems, I think, with this particular condition, PTSD, is really being able to get some sleep. So the sedative part is really key. Now let's talk a little bit about how we take it, because the nice part about cannabis is you have a number of different what we call methods of consumption. They're referred to as routes of administration. And I think that when we do the pharma game, you've got pills, you've got shots, you've got creams, but you're kind of limited to that. Or when you get into cannabis, you've got a whole different world. You've got your orals, your sublinguals, your inhalation, and your topicals. Manny, give me a kind of a quick overview of some of these. And Jeff, I'm going to have you, Jeff, dig down on some of the inhalation stuff. But Manny, give me a little bit overview of the basic categories.
So in the state of Florida, you have 6 routes of administrations or methods of consumption. You have oral, sublingual, topical, edible, oral, and inhalation, if I didn't mention that one already. And then the 6th one being a smoking route. And I separate that because it falls under different regulations, if you will. And I point that out particularly because each dispensary has to submit their product under whatever route of administration they feel most beneficial to the state. And sometimes that could be multiple routes of administration. And if the state approves it, then you're good to go. That's a big point, because you may be able to get something at one dispensary as a sublingual or oral, but if you go to another dispensary, you can only get it under sublingual, and that's all based on what they submitted to the state for approval.
But there's basically more than one way of taking it. I think that's really the important part of this. It's something that if you feel comfortable, for example, with tinctures, or you feel comfortable smoking, or you feel comfortable with topicals, this is something you can use, and it really helps you customize it to your particular needs. Now, this slide is key because we have something called the onset time, how long does it take to affect, and then there's duration, which is how long it actually lasts. And each of these has the different characteristics. Jeff, I think the most important one that people talk about and the most popular is really inhalation. Tell me a little bit about that, because inhalation down here, which is inhalation and flower, works almost immediately, and you get 6 or 2 to 6 hours of duration.
Yeah, I wanted to say real quick, I have within my reach, I have every one of these available routes of administration except for the transdermal patch within reach right now. Because like I said before, I use pieces of cannabis throughout the day, so I don't have bad days. I elevate first thing in the morning to my level that makes me feel good, and then I try to keep keeping that same level all day. Sometimes I can't smoke.
Jeff, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. You're bringing out something that's really, really important, and that is you can mix and match these routes of administration.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I yes, absolutely. So, but my choice is flower or inhalation. I like concentrates as well too, because they're very effective to get you to that sweet spot right away. You don't have to fool around or whatever. And they're very convenient. But flower is like the most traditional way. For me, it's the most relaxing because I get in a minor therapy session when I'm breaking up my cannabis flowers. I'm tearing them apart. Looking at them, smelling them, feeling them. They're
Sure.
sticky. That whole preparation to take my medicine is kind of a mindset for me, and I've used that since I started using cannabis. I noticed more and more and more that particular part of the process helps me.
Now, I do want to point out, and you and I have had discussions about this, that when you use flower, you roll the joint and you take that 550-degree flame and put it up to the joint, you're going to burn off about half of the cannabinoids, almost all the terpenes, and all of the flavonoids.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you lose a lot of the medical efficacy. However, it still works. You just got to use more of it. And that's why people use vape pens, because they're still able to use the inhalation part. They're able to set that terpene profile and really bring it out. And you're not burning anything off. You're vaping as opposed to burning. I think that's an important distinction. But really, I think it's important to point out your meditative process of doing flower is just as important as the flower itself. Sure. I mean, there's another way people tend to go to, and that is a lot of people start with tinctures and sprays. Tell me a little bit about that, because they typically take 15 to 20 minutes of work and will last for 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah, so I'll jump on that, Mark, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When you're using tinctures and sprays, they do have a semi-rapid onset, 15 to 20 minute. And the longer you can hold it under your tongue or in your mouth, the better absorption you get through your oral mucosis. Hence, 15 minutes, maybe sometimes even an hour if you swallow it right away. But the benefit of all of this, I just want to point out, is that this is where you usually have a prescription where you're told what to take, when to take it, and this is really more of a personal journey for each individual. And once you find what you're going to use in tandem and the titration upwards to find your sweet spot, is where you're really going to find these effects most beneficial.
Now, one of the other ways people take cannabis is what they call edibles, this oral route that's over here. And this is the edibles and the capsules, which can take anywhere from 20 minutes if you have certain edibles, capsules maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours of work, but they last for 4 hours or longer, up to potentially 10 hours. So, for example, if you want to get a good night's sleep, it's not a bad idea a couple hours before you go to bed. Try an edible. When you actually go to bed, you will fall asleep and you'll stay asleep all night. Where if you use a tincture, you can make up in the middle of the night. Same thing with inhalation. You got a couple of hours and you'll wake up in the middle of the night. Edibles will carry you through the entire evening, and I think that's really, really important. However, edibles take potentially up to 2 hours to work, so be very, very careful. There's many people who start taking an edible, it doesn't work after about 20 minutes, so they do it again. Jeff, you've had some people who had some experience with that, right?
Oh yeah.
You don't want to eat these things like Skittles. Let's put it that way, because what happens is whatever uncomfortableness, whether that's anxiety or the effects that you're looking at, the negative effects you're looking at, you'll bring those on a lot faster if you start popping these things that are there.
It is relatively easy to learn what your dose will be, so you don't do that to yourself more than once. But
right. And I'm a fan of edibles, but I do want to caution people. They're making edibles that really taste so good. It's really tempting to try it again. And, when you have that Hershey bar and you like it, you try to take another piece. That's one thing. But with edibles, you're actually adding something to your body that later on could really, really affect you.
And Mark, at the beginning of this, you mentioned how inhalation is a favorite over most of the other routes. And I like to point out that even at the dispensaries, they're going to suggest such a thing. Always remember that if you take in a product, as far as marijuana, it's if you feel the effects fast, it'll go out fast. So fast in, fast out. Whereas capsules, edibles, tinctures, and sprays, particularly capsules and edibles, takes a lot longer for it to get into your system. It's got to go through the first pass effect and everything. It's got to transition. That's another topic, but it also lasts significantly longer. So if you're just starting out and you're comfortable with inhalation, that might be a benefit for you. So that way you can really figure out and dial in which products you're going to use.
So we talked a little bit about vaping, and especially this is where you get into the vape pens, because vaping is really a steam that's going into your lungs as opposed to a burnt material, which can have carcinogens in them. So vaping is actually better for you, although candidly, anything you put into your lungs, you should always be careful. But really, if you enjoy the smoking part of it, vaping really allows you the advantage of being able to tune in to that actual temperature. Manny, tell me a little bit about that, because this low, medium, and high of a vape pen is something that allows you to really dial in your relief.
I'd be happy to, Mark, because this is a really good one. most persons that are using marijuana, when it comes to temperature, usually it's persons that are thinking of temperature are doing dabs, and that's another topic when you're using concentrates. But I point that out because there are batteries out there that you screw your cartridge on or you put your pod into that you can actually change the temperature setting between low, medium, and high.
Yes.
And anywhere from low to medium is really good because you're really getting the benefits of the terpenes along with the cannabinoids. When you get to that high heat of 400 or above, you're
Mhm.
really burning off most of those terpenes. They're very volatile, so they're going to disappear really quick. You're even getting rid of THC, most of the CBD for that part, and you're hitting a different component of THC. It's converting to THCV, which is
Mhm.
going to be significantly more euphoric, great
Mhm.
for that breakthrough pain or breakthrough anxiety in this situation. But you got to be very careful because you're also going to blow through your tolerance if you continue to do that. That's why I
Sure.
suggest for breakthrough situations when you really need that hard hit or that hard effect, if you will, that's when you
Mhm.
want to go to the high heat. I personally, Mark, like to stay around the medium heat range. I
Mhm.
don't go too much higher than that. If I'm just kind of feeling having a good day and I don't need so much medicine or marijuana, I would use a low heat so that I don't really raise my tolerance when I don't really need to.
And I know that I like to stick around 356. In my particular case, I'm trying to fight inflammation and pain. And so both of those help me. Both of those are really treated better at that temperature range than anything else. And by the way, if I want to be able to, as Jeff was pointing out, he rolls a joint. What I do is I have a dryer vaporizer. This is a machine, or actually a device, where I actually put the cannabis in a little pod, put that in the device, and then I can set the actual temperature of that particular device, and it actually now produces steam. It acts like a vape pen to be able to give me that experience that I'm looking forward to.
I
Really,
have one of those as well. I
yeah.
use that as well.
And I tell you, I love it because it lets me dial in the terpenes that I need, and I find
Yeah.
that that's really, really helpful.
And the same, I like it. I like dry herb vape. The tabletop is obviously the best, but
Sure.
for on the go, it's not bad to have one in your pocket.
Mhm.
And even dabs, you can dial your dabs into this too. What Manny was saying earlier, it's not just
Yeah, it's not
well,
just the pen itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
not just the pen itself.
This is an important chart because once you
Sure.
understand what you're trying to achieve, the terpenes that help you, this lets you dial them right in and really home in on being able to get the relief that you're really looking for. Now, one of the other things that comes into play is when you're looking at being able to help yourself, you really need to be able to really figure out what your dosing level is, your therapeutic dosing level. And Jeff, this is really important to really not only guide yourself and figure out what your dosing is, but doing the journaling.
Well, the best way to analyze this is dollars wise. So if you can get your target range in, then you know exactly what you need to use and you're not spending any extra money.
That's a
So
good point.
sometimes though you don't know where you're at and you may take more than you should have
Mhm.
or than you needed and you'll quickly find out and be able to dial that in and or you'll definitely know if you didn't take too much. So
Sure.
yeah, the target range is the that's what I try to set myself at in the beginning so I can
Mhm.
run all day because my body hurts and my mind gets tired and I need to I need to I need to keep myself at a at that medicated level
Sure.
to be able to keep going.
Right. And really the key here is to go low and go slow. In other words,
Yeah,
if you're using
absolutely.
tinctures or if you're using gummies, cut that gummy in half or that edible in half. Um, uh, or basically go low, figure out how much you're using. And
It's
we're going to
better
talk
to
about
take
journaling
too
in just a
little than
moment,
too
but really
much.
go up to a point where you'll begin to feel better. I know when I first started, I started with tincture drops. I wasn't getting much relief the first day or two. I increased it to half with eyedropper, three-quarters of an eyedropper. Then I began to feel good. When I went to a whole eyedropper, I wasn't feeling as good because cannabis is biphasic, meaning if you go past that therapeutic dosing level, what you can do is you can actually, it's not feel you not get the relief you're looking for. So I knew that a whole eyedropper wasn't what I needed. It was three-quarters of an eyedropper. And once I figured that out, you're right, Jeff. I saved a lot of money by not buying too many products and using the wrong products.
It's always better to be under the target level than over the target level when we're talking about psychoactive effects.
Sure. And
And
really, this therapeutic dosing level was referred to as your sweet spot.
So especially with like some of the older veterans that we've dealt with, they have been maybe sold a basket of goods and took too many of those combinations of things. And like you said, maybe didn't feel it in time and did another one. And then now they went from little or no relief to the, oh my God side of the high dose.
Sure.
And I had a Korean War veteran call 911 because he couldn't feel his legs anymore. And he thought he was having a stroke, but it was all cannabis.
Yeah.
I'd
Jeff,
also like to point out, Mark, on this is probably the hardest part to deal with when you're first starting out.
It
Because I
is.
always point out to a lot of my clients, I chuckle about it, and they do after I tell them, your brain, especially when you're dealing with PTS or PTSD, you're going to get very, very greedy as soon as you find that sweet spot or
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that therapeutic dose. You're going to feel good and be like, I want more of it. And then you're going to go
Yeah.
over. And if you
Yeah.
don't do that, the other hard part is you're going to find a sweet spot. You're going to be disciplined enough to stay there. And then when you go back to try to reach it, you're going to need a little bit more. Your body is trying to find out where that tolerance or that sweet spot is going to be. So don't be discouraged if you have to take a little bit more over the first week, maybe 2 weeks until you maintain your therapeutic dose or that target range.
Yeah, that's really, really important. I think one of the keys to doing this is journaling. Jeff, you had a good point about journaling.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people don't know exactly what to write or, how to do it or whatever. But like for me, taking so many different types of cannabis throughout the day, I need to kind of write some stuff down so I know exactly what I did, especially if I'm figuring it out. And you do figure it out, you want to be able to go back and say, oh man, I felt great. Look, there's a spot for notes in this section here. If there's a link for this is a great sample treatment journal. Like there's
And I should
nothing
point
that
out
you're
this
missing.
comes from the MMTC patient information brochure, which not only you can pick one up at your local MMTC medical marijuana treatment clinics of Florida, you can pick one up from them, but also you can get them online. And on the link that you'll get after this particular webinar, and also in the notes, if you're on YouTube, you'll actually have a link to a digital version where you can actually go get that digital connection and find the sample journal that's in there. This is important that you have something that you can work from.
It's actually a really good thing. And Jeff, I would even go as far as a question for most of the clients I deal with that are veterans. I find it a lot easier for them to use a journal as long as I give them an example
Yeah.
or a treatment or a
Yeah.
sample like this. When I deal with regular civilian clients, they're very reluctant to do so, even if I provide them a sample. But I say that because I want to point out how important it is especially when you're first starting out. I've been doing this for at least 9 years now, and I've stopped journaling as much. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I'm doing now, but I didn't realize the importance of it until I was lost in the sauce, as we say, and trying to figure
Yeah.
things out. And then I had to start all over again. So if that's the case, please, again, don't get discouraged. Find a treatment journal or a sample treatment journal. We're going to give you some links. You're going to get copies of this presentation. And because MMTC has one of the best ones I've seen thus far.
And I know, as an example, is when I had my left knee replaced, I really wasn't doing as much journaling as I can, but I started journaling. And one night I ran out of THC products, and I thought I needed them for the pain. So I used a little bit more CBD product, and guess what? The pain went away. It shouldn't say it went completely away, but it went down to a tolerable level. And when I talked to my doctors and some other people the next day, we found out that what the CBD was doing was relieving or reducing the amount of inflammation. And by doing that, it reduced the amount of pain. And it dawned on me by being able to journal. I went back and looked and found out that when I did use a little bit extra CBD, my pain level was going down. And I kind of went, oh, yeah, there we go. But if I hadn't journaled, wouldn't be able to make that connection. And I think that's what's important. So, gentlemen, we have talked about a lot about theory of it. This is an example. I'm using one dispensary here in Florida Air. They have a number of products that are out there that really can be used for PTS. And Manny, you had an important link between this and journaling.
Absolutely. So most are going to look at this, and there's, like you said, a plethora of product out there between chews, sublinguals, vapes, smokable flower. There are many more than that. But if you look at the terpene list on these, for the layman person who's looking at this and can't understand the differences between those terpenes, marking these down in your journal will help you have that conversation with experts such as ourselves that can help guide you through that and what recipe to find. So eventually we can make you your own master chef. You can shop at Air, you can shop at any other dispensary throughout the state that's going to be beneficial to you. Let's say if Air didn't have that particular product that you're looking for or something comparable. So journaling, taking down these notes, if the terpenes are available online, mark them down. The cannabinoids, unfortunately, even some of these will show you the effects that they should have. I won't say that they will have because each individual is different. Most of the websites will have reviews as well where you can take notes, and linking all this together over about a week or two, you're going to become your own master chef and you won't possibly need us anymore.
Yeah,
I say that in a good sense, fellas,
No,
because
for
if I
sure.
can let somebody live on their own, I've achieved my goal.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Look, I mean, Jeff, look, the objective, and Jeff and Manny, the objective of this webinar is to help people get their life back. And if just one person gets their life back from watching this, we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. Although we'd
Absolutely.
like to do more than just one person. But here's an example of being able to walk in with a list of terpenes and being able to identify a route of administration you're comfortable with, and knowing that the dispensary does have products that can match that. That's what's really key, and not just AIR, but other dispensaries here in the state of Florida. So we also have covered a lot of topics, and Jeff, maybe you can help me a little bit with this. There is a lot of resources for people who need help in a lot of different areas, whether you're a veteran, whether it's a suicide hotline, whether you need an appointment with a healthcare professional. This is really key. So Jeff, tell me a little bit about this, because you do a lot of work in this area.
So yeah, like I don't not answer my phone anytime. I get so many spam calls, but I never know if it's not a veteran. And so yeah, reach out. Like the stigma should be, let's get everybody on board and help everybody out. There should be no wonderment whatsoever. If you are feeling down and feel like you're going to hurt yourself, contact somebody. There are several available: the suicide crisis line, the veterans crisis line. Uh, Call me if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. And like when I say it, I mean it. Like I'm not just, it's not lip service. I answer my phone call.
Yeah, but I think it's really key to point out, get help. It's okay to
Get
say,
help.
I have this particular issue, or I think I might have this issue. You may not have it, but if you think you have it, get some help. Reach out to a friend, talk to somebody in the faith community, talk to the different things that are down here. Half of solving your problem is realizing that you have it, or coming to the realization it's there. And I think that's really key to being able to overcome a lot of this. And really, again, our goal here is to help you get your life back.
And I'd point out, Mark, I'm getting kind of chills by this slide particularly. I've used the Veterans Crisis Line. I don't know how many times. Well, not that many. I would say probably 5 or 6 times in my career of 21 years in the service. From when I was overseas to when I was in the States. I used it once when I was in training, looking to get promoted. And you would think you're in training, getting promoted. Why are you in crisis? You never know. Reach out, and I will tell you from experience that each time that I reached out, the person that I spoke to was genuine, at the very least empathetic, if
Yes.
not sympathetic. They took the time. There was times where I sat on the phone for almost 2.5 hours, and they worked with me, got me appointments, helped me through my crisis, and here I am today to share that experience and hopefully help others. And just like you, Jeff, if you reach out to us, we will not turn you down. We will not
No.
turn you away or ignore you.
And I
It's
think that's
important to point out.
important. Yeah. I think it's important to point out that, I know a lot of veterans come back and feel like, I don't need it, or I don't need help, or, well, when you do, don't be afraid to ask, because you gave so much away for your time. You might as well, you don't want to give it up for nothing. So make
Right.
that phone call. It's easy.
You have a group called the Grateful Veterans. Tell us a little bit about your mission and what you do.
So we help veterans in a bunch of different ways, but the main way is we get them their cannabis card. We try to get them a doctor's visit for free, and we pay the 77.75 state fee that might go away in July if it gets to the house in time before they go on break or whatever. But that's what we start our group that way, and inevitably we help in so many different ways, like from crisis to yoga to sound bowls to just some peer-to-peer support. We've kind of made a stride in the mental health, having someone come in and lead group sessions. So there's a lot of things that the Grateful Veteran does, but it all started with cannabis, and cannabis is still that glue, I think, that holds us together and opens us up and allows us to share those things that might be bothering us. So that's what we do.
It's a support group for veterans, of which cannabis is one of the options, opportunities and avenues that you have. And Jeff, thank you very much for doing this. I know the
Thank you.
gratefulveteran.com is where people should go. You've done a lot of good work, and I've had the pleasure of working with you over the years and seen a lot of positive things happen from this.
Thank
Manny,
you.
on your side, the Blunt Joint, you do a lot of work to basically the same kind of thing, but not just for veterans, but for the whole community.
I do. We are working to become a nonprofit. We're not offering any financial assistance just yet. I'm hoping to get there. But particularly what we do is we facilitate discussions with any person or persons, entities, police departments, sheriff departments, you name it, for educational and informational purposes. I work closely with a few physicians up here in the Panhandle that will help with discounts right now, in case you need that assistance and what physicians would be better for your particular instance. For instance, we have, or I have a pediatric physician that I work with for those who are under 18 who are dealing with epilepsy or ADD or something that may be more detrimental, unfortunately. And anything that you need is 100% free. It's all tailored to the needs that you need. We're going to have very personal questions. We're going to build a relationship. We're going to go on this journey together, and we're going to stick with you as long as you need us. And then if you need us later down the line, we'll be there for you as well. And I just want to thank you, Mark, for allowing me to present that to your audience as well. And Jeff, for allowing me to be on board with you.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Well, and I want to thank you both because you're providing very, very important and much needed support services for a lot of folks that really need help. I do want to, first of all, point out that Marijuana Aware, which is what I represent, is really available not only in on webinar formats, which you're seeing tonight, but also we have a YouTube channel that has a number of videos out there that can help you on how to get started, how to go through your journey, how to find out the products that are there. Please feel free to take a look at that. Again, that YouTube piece is really important as well as the webinars itself. And of course, if you want to get a card, I recommend the Medical Marijuana Treatment Clinics of Florida, primarily because these are doctors that are 22 locations in Florida, but more importantly, what they do is they support you after you get your card. In many cases, a doctor will get you a card, you'll get the recommendation, which means you'll tell you here's a certain route of administration to use, but it doesn't tell you what to use. And this is where Medical Marijuana Treatment Clinics of Florida come into play. They can help you. They have actually a dosing center that can really help you, and it's online. You can call. So those are kind of some resources for you. Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, Mark, this wouldn't happen without you. So thank you for everything that you do to continue these series that you produce. They are super helpful for the journey, for sure.
Listen, compliments get you everywhere, Jeff.
And I'd agree. There's not much else I could say to that. Thank you, Mark. Thank MMTC for all they do as well. And I'm hoping that we could reach some people this evening.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. And more importantly, to the folks that are watching, we hope you got something out of this. Our goal is, again, to help someone and help you be able to get your life back. And if we've been able to accomplish that, then we've accomplished what we wanted to get there. And if you still have some questions, I do want to point out this is part of a webinar series. And next week, we're going to be talking about arthritis. So if that's something that's bothering you, please join us. And thank you very much for joining us. Check out the YouTube channels and our webinars in the future. And more importantly, if you need some support in this area, please contact the Blunt Joint and the Grateful Veterans. Thank you very much for watching.